Hello, this is Ted C. Williams,
And I'm Rob Brace.
and welcome to episode one of Nerd Dad Chat. Rob and I are from Nerd Dads, and you can find us on Facebook at Nerd Dads, and our website is nerd-dads.com. Nerd Dads is a project that we have created that brings the joys of parenthood and nerd culture together, and we're happy to share our thoughts with you tonight. So Rob and I just got back from seeing the movie Justice League, the most recent comic book adaptation on the big screen, and we'll share our thoughts about the film in just a little bit. But before we do, we wanted to take a look back at the incredible year that has been 2017 when it comes to comic book movie adaptations. You know, if there's ever a time that will be remembered as the pinnacle of comic book adaptations in cinematic history, 2017 will likely be that year. So tonight, Rob and I are going to take a look back at those at the comic book movies of 2017, give our thoughts on each film, and also, since we are nerd dads after all, talk about how to share these films with your kids.
That's absolutely right. And that's not to say that the last couple years haven't been absolutely loaded with comic book movies. You look back to 2015 rather. We had Ant-Man, we had Age of Ultron, we had the Fantastic Four movie. Not great reviews, it still happened. 2016, we had Deadpool, Suicide Squad, Civil War. So those were big years on a whole. This year, however, has just completely blown those away with continuing those universes and having one after another movies come out to keep us sated.
And not only has there been such a great quantity of comic book movie adaptations in 2017, but just the level of quality in each project. One of the things that's, as we're going to talk about, really the film that we liked least of the entire year was still a good movie. There wasn't a film in this genre that we saw this past year that we regret seeing, or like in 2015 when we went to see Batman v Superman. I left the movie theater kind of mad because I'm such a big DC fan, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. But there really wasn't that type of moment in this year. Yes, there was like one or two films that were considered comic book movies, but weren't really popular in the mainstream. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets
Yep.
technically is a comic book movie, but it's a French comic. It wasn't one that I was very comfortable or very knowledgeable of, and I think like so many others, people passed by. That I never went to see that film. But pretty much every other comic book movie that came out, I went to theaters and enjoyed. And one of the things that when I went to the theaters with many of them was with the first time I went to go see them was with the idea that I was screening these to be able to see whether I wanted my kids to see these films or not. My children are 8 and 4. My daughter's 8 years old. My son's 4, and so what they're ready to see is going to be different from other kids. And you what
Yeah, mine are currently, I have a 16-year-old and then 9 and 7.
So age is kind of similar, but you have with your daughter being a teenager. I mean, that's a little bit different experience that they're
Mm-hmm.
and expectations on what is suitable for them and what not, and what they'll be what they'll get out of a film as opposed to your younger kids. So you have a
Yep.
little bit wider spectrum on that. But as a whole, 2017 was just a really great year filled with great cinematic experiences, great adaptations of characters and literature that we've loved for years, and now they're
Mm-hmm.
finally been brought to the big screen, and uh, and it's just been wonderful.
So the first one we're talking about actually dates back to the trailer. When the two of us saw BVS together, we saw the trailer for Lego Batman movie. And I turned to Ted in the theater and I said, we're seeing that together next year. We have a date, February of 2017. And so I brought my boys over to Wisconsin, and he brought his kids. The six of us together went and saw this in February of this year. Fantastic film. I enjoyed the heck out of it as an adult. My boys loved it as kids.
I the what I love the most, the first 30 minutes of this movie, I don't think I've laughed at another, whether it's comic book or just comedy in general. There's so many, not only is there references that comic book fans will, or fans of Batman will enjoy, but it just the style of humor that the Lego movies have created ever since the original Lego movie from a few years back. A lot of jokes in that same vein where it plays off of child humor of when you're playing with the dialogue that you have in your head when you're a child playing with toys is just so prevalent in the jokes that were in this movie, and also but the way that they integrated all the Batman lore, whether it was the comics, whether it was the cartoons or all the cinematic movies that have been done, and there's so much content for this movie to play off of.
And they integrated that humor so well for adults who have been through all of those iterations that they were able to make us laugh and have the kids still enjoy the story that was going on at the same time.
It was just it started the first time I saw it. I thought it started to drag a little bit as the movie went on, but it's a film that because just like every other parent, I think it now owns the film. When we've gone back and watch it with the kids, it really doesn't stop. It's just a funny, clever movie the entire way. The way that they work in other franchises from other films, not just comic book movies, but like Lord of the Rings shows up, The Matrix, Doctor Who, Gremlins. Just how much they were able to bring in was just so well done. And one of the things, we're not going to talk about the film at length, but later on, because it's not a comic book movie, but the Ninjago Lego movie came out this year as well, and it didn't have the same humor. Did you end up seeing that?
I did
film?
not, and,
Yeah.
and the boys love Ninjago. They weren't pushing me to go see it.
Yeah, it really. I think if you've seen there's the cartoon that's on TV. It plays off a little bit of that. It tries to do a little bit of the Lego style humor, but it really doesn't hit the same notes.
No, this really was a Warner Brothers. Where can we pull all the punches, or not pull all the punches? Rather, where can we get all of our jabs at our own movie history
Yes.
in one place where the parents will love it and the kids will appreciate it.
Yeah, so that was such a great way to start off the year when it came to these kind of films. Just it's one that will come back as repeat viewing, just like with the original Lego movie, and it's great to see that kind of where these movies will go. Yes, the Ninjago movie did really do go where I was hoping. It was still a fine movie, but didn't go where you wanted to. But you could tell that if they stay on this track with the Lego movies, it's going to be a fun franchise to watch for years to come. And it's probably also getting back to more, not so much the Lego, but also when it comes to Batman. This is probably one of the best Jokers that have been on
Yes.
film.
Yes.
Zach Galifianakis' take on it was a really cute take on
Yes.
the character. Obviously not much more of the classic 1966 Adam West show.
Yes, but still tapped into the deep psychological issues of the New 52, where it was, I'm dependent on you, Batman, for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it still tapped into that, and it was a kids' movie.
Yep. And Will Arnett as Batman, it's not so much Will Arnett's performance as Batman is more, it's Will Arnett. It's not
Yeah.
so much Batman, but he
Yeah.
still does a really, really good job. I
Yes.
mean, he's not going to compete with Kevin Conroy when it comes to animated
Right.
Batman, because nobody's ever going to compete with him.
Correct.
But still,
And there's good subtle reminiscence of the original Lego movie that come up again as well,
Yeah.
and it still retains its own storyline.
yeah. And yeah, my children absolutely loved it. It was
Yep.
I think of the comic book films, this was the only one that I took my kids to opening night without screening, just because I mean, not only was it PG, because knowing it was a Lego movie,
Yeah.
there a lot of nervousness he'd come with action films when
Yeah.
it comes to violence or anything. That wasn't going to be there, and so it was
Yep.
one that we could enjoy right away. My kids loved it all the way through. My younger one, the end of Act Two, when like I mentioned earlier, it does drag a little bit.
Yeah.
He started getting a little antsy, but then it picks right up again with a lot of action and
It
humor.
does.
So
Yep, I agree.
so yeah, it was a great way to start. And then a month later in March, we got Logan.
And you go to the other end of the spectrum where you're at a fantastic family one where you can all sit down and enjoy it on multiple levels. And now you come to Logan, which is very much a grown-up movie.
It is, and I'm curious. Did your daughter, since she's 16 years old, have you taken her to see that?
No,
yet? You haven't?
no. And going back a year with Deadpool, we actually had some expectations on her before we would let her see that one.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, she, to my knowledge, hasn't seen it yet.
So, I think this would be a film. When it comes to some R-rated films, I mean, there's sometimes films get the R rating because of gratuitous violence or gratuitous sex or gratuitous, it is the excess of things, and they and as parents, you don't want to have your children around that. But there are some R-rated films that I think once your children become, and granted, I only have my eldest is 8, so I have only so much I can speak off of. But when I think of films that I want to show to my children first as their first R-rated films, there are your more historical films like your Saving Private Ryan's or your Schindler's List or those kind of films. And there's some like that you just want to show them to scare the hell out of them because like Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah.
As soon as my kids think about
Don't do drugs.
don't do drugs, and
Yeah.
here's why. But I think with Logan, I think I'll probably show. I'd be okay with my kids seeing it, like 14, 15.
Yeah.
But sitting down with them, because at that point they'll have seen a lot of action movies. They'll have seen the superhero films, but Logan really isn't a superhero film.
No.
It's so much more a Western, and
Yeah.
what is great about it, it's a great story of loss.
Yes.
And it's or like watching depression on film and just and seeing the deterioration.
You know, I'm going to challenge you on that. I
Okay.
wouldn't even say it's about depression as much as realization.
Yeah, that's a good way-
it's about
better way to put it.
acceptance.
Yeah.
It's about this is reality, and you know what? I'm good. I did it. I
Yep.
did it. I did what had to be done. I'm good accepting the outcome of that.
And that's your third act. The first act, which I thought was so beautiful, was when you saw that everything is going wrong in the character's life.
Yeah.
And
Clearly, there's been a catastrophe.
yes.
Yeah.
There's been a catastrophe, and Dr. Xavier or Professor Xavier, holy cow! There's my nerd card. I'll turn it in now. But the mental deterioration that he has, and the way that Logan is dealing with age, even though he's been an immortal for centuries,
Yeah.
now he's finally coming to the end, and especially if you're somebody who has seen a loved one go through Alzheimer's or any type of mental deterioration, it was to see that with a superhero character, and that how that challenge is a greater challenge than anything that they've faced on the battlefield or or any costume villain.
Yeah.
That realization that and not only for Professor Xavier but really for Logan,
Yeah.
the son in the relationship and the way that they struggle in he's doing everything he can to take care
because
of him.
he also found his humanity through this person,
Right.
and now he's watching this person fade away.
Yep.
You know.
And it's a parallel that a lot of families go through when they
Yeah.
see the patriarch in their family or somebody that they care for dearly lose their battles with
Yeah.
with Father Time,
Yeah.
and there's and it's inevitability, but it doesn't even though
And
it's,
then he's introduced to an aspect where he has to take over that mantle.
yeah.
And he's like, whoa, I never expected this piece to be real.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's real.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be this guy to somebody else. I didn't plan on that. I'm not equipped for that.
Because just like with any parent, whether your parenthood is thrust upon you or you've been planning for it for a long time, you're never prepared
Right.
for it.
Right.
And to see someone like Logan, who is the epitome of male machismo,
Yeah.
try to raise a child and yet want that child to be nothing like him.
Right.
And it just there's so many dynamics far beyond anything that has to deal with the fact that he's got claws
Yes.
and he can.
Yes, exactly.
All the
He's
superhero
not just
things.
a supporting character who has a lot of aesthetics that we can appreciate. He actually is the pivotal character who has something that we want to relate to and possibly learn from.
Yeah.
As well. And I agree. It was a very three-dimensional story.
Yeah,
it really was.
Because I'm a dad, I don't get to go to see all the movies that I want to see.
Right.
So I would not be a good member of the Academy
Yeah.
for Oscar time. So I can't say exactly of all the films, what the best film was. Logan for me was my favorite film of 2017.
It was fantastic.
It's just a beautiful. It's a sad, haunting, beautiful. It just. I think also the thing again with it being a comic book movie, when there were the fight scenes, they were not your typical fight scene. There was not a single fight scene that when I'm watching in the theater thinking, "Oh, cool, this is awesome! Did you see that jab?" Like you see with so many other films. This one, you felt. I mean, it felt every punch felt or like every death felt permanent and painful.
It did. I would also say though, on top of that, the opening scene in it set you up to know. This is a grown-up movie. The point of that there was quite a bit of graphic violence in that opening scene. It set you up to know two things: he's aged, he's debilitated, and this is a movie for adults. That was the purpose of that first scene. It was very graphic, very violent, and I would argue that the purpose of that opening scene was to tell you who this movie is for and who it's not for.
Yeah. If you're looking for a fun popcorn film, no, stay home.
Right.
This isn't for you.
Yeah.
But really, and because with action films, with comic books, it's so easy to make violence fun. And I mean, there's many times where it can be where it's escapist entertainment.
Yes.
Logan doesn't do that, and it's good that you don't. And I think that's also why I think it would be appropriate to show. Your teenagers from 14 and on, and say every all the fights that you've seen that look really cool.
Yeah.
People get hurt, when they get hit, and there's consequences to the violence, and I think that's also a good message.
Now the flip side of that is the next film that came out, and the next one that came out was Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Which was a lot of fun, and there were consequences, but that one, by contrast, was a fun film.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
That was the greatest surprise. We had a conversation right after we saw it, and how our generation Star Wars was the great space opera.
Yes.
Guardians of the Galaxy, take the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe out of the equation. I think 20 years from now, the films that probably will last the longest will be the Guardians films.
Yes.
Because of the separate universe that they have,
Yep.
and the how rich each character is, the relationship that they have.
Well,
with
yes,
one another.
and one of the things they do now that our Star Wars didn't, the background characters actually hold a very high value in these stories, and they get their own presence, and they're all from a different world. They're all from a different reality, but they get their own presence. They don't just serve as a backdrop to the main plot. They actually have their own story to tell. And I would say that films these days are looking for a richer background. than the Star Wars ones that we grew up with, which were very linear. Here's the plot, here's the main characters, this is where we're going. And the ones now are saying, here's the background characters also, let's hear a little bit more.
And we'll introduce the dynamics that they can have with one
Yeah,
another,
yeah.
and they'll all link in at some
Yes,
point
yeah.
together at the climax. And each relationship that they had, or when there was, because it was really three separate stories.
Yes.
In Guardians of the Galaxy, you had Star-Lord
Yep.
reconnecting with and really Star-Lord, who's the main quote unquote character, really is probably one of the least interesting characters in the film. Not saying he's bad, just
No.
probably one of the least
Yeah.
interesting. You had Gamora and her sister
Yep.
reconnecting. You had
Rocket and Yondu.
Rocket and Yondu's connection, Drax and Mantis, and
Yeah.
how they connect. I mean, and then they all culminate together. It just great, great character development. That the first Guardians film, for me, I like the second. When you go online, you read a lot of the reviews. A lot of people say, a lot of critics like the first one more than the 2nd.
Mhm.
I'm much more the latter, or
Yeah.
the other way around, because I like the character development.
Yep.
It was nice to be introduced in the first one.
Yeah.
But now we really get into
Yes.
the meat and potatoes of what makes these characters tick. The only down. I don't know how much of a downside it was. The main antagonist in the film, Ego,
Yep.
without moving with most of these films, we'll try not to spoil very much, but the films have been out for a while, so hopefully people have seen
Right,
them
yeah.
at this point. But
This one doesn't take place in Little China.
no,
You know,
yeah. Mr. Russell was
There
not
is
there.
some big trouble, though.
Yes, there was
big trouble. Yeah.
and he was the big trouble.
Yeah, he was.
But
yeah.
he was interesting enough. A lot of these films, and we'll be discussing this later as well, but a lot of his motives kind of are in the stereotypical mold that a lot of the villains in comic book movies seem to be, where
Yes.
the all dominating, want to take
Yes.
over the universe of the world, and there's gonna be some magic, something that sets something off, and we have to stop them
Yep.
as quickly as possible. So I mean, our villain in this story has a lot of the same motives as well. He's still interesting
He is.
as well.
He is, because he actually is a part of the story.
Yeah.
He actually adds to the story. He's not just a villain that is introduced. Here's the conflict, and we resolve it.
Yep.
He actually is a part of the story
Mhm.
of one of the central characters.
Yep.
You know, and that does add to it.
And I think, and now I'll say spoiler warning. You skip a couple minutes ahead if you don't want to hear it. If for some goofy reason you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and you're still listening to this podcast, your priorities are a little bit messed up. But skip a couple minutes ahead. But as a dad, looking at the father dynamic between Ego and Yandu, and what it means to be a father. Is it just blood? Is it more than that? Is it the one that nurtures you?
Absolutely, and
Yes.
I'm gonna jump in on that one. In this day and age, especially, father is not always biological, and this film really explores that idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
And with one, there was my son refers to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 as the sad one. Regardless of how many hilarious moments, all the action, because Yandu sacrifices his life, and he took such, and I think this is where.
But no spoilers, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said skip ahead. I gave fair warning.
Yes.
I stuttered long enough where people were able to skip ahead. But I think this also goes to, and again, we'll refer this at the end when we're talking about Justice League. One of the strengths that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has shown is how strong the character development has
Yes,
been.
yes.
And even with limited screen time, like you were mentioning before with the side characters, you're able to invest in those
Yep.
characters. So when something does happen to them, you feel the impact, you feel the weight.
Well, yes, and I think the important thing about that is if you are a casual viewer as opposed to completely invested in the MCU, okay, you could drop into a movie, this one specifically, you could enjoy this movie on its own merits because of the character development, the character journey, and then the character advancement, and step back out again. Now, if you're fully invested in the MCU, this will also add to the overall story arc. But if you are just this sounded good, I heard it was good, I should see it, you will be able to step in, enjoy the characters, care about the characters, follow their own personal journeys, and then step back out again.
Yep, it was just
It's a wonder that you can do that. Speaking of wonder,
man, you are great at transitions,
transitions
aren't
are
you?
my
Man,
thing, right?
king
Yeah.
of transitions. So after we left the movie theater tonight when we saw Justice League, we were talking about the strengths and weaknesses of Justice League, and we also talked about how surprised ever since Batman v Superman we have been in Gal Gadot's performance of Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And because it was one of those roles that has been talked about for years. People doing ever since Linda Carter did it for the television show. It for whatever reason it hasn't been done on the screen until now. And when Gal was cast, it seemed very peculiar. I was always picturing somebody like that was like a mixed martial artist. I was expecting somebody much more muscular.
And I thought they should go full out muscular, Amazonian. Don't look for attractiveness. Look for could survive in the wild.
Yeah,
type of a thing.
I think there was. It was a lot of like the physical attributes. What was going to make Wonder Woman, and as sexist as that does sound, but at the same time, it is a comic book film. It is these are characters that we have seen visually for a long time. It's not like taking from a novel where it's the reader's interpretation. We have seen physical or representations of these characters for decades.
Yeah.
So when Miss Gadot was cast, it seemed like a missed opportunity. How wrong could we have been
Absolutely,
on that?
you are correct.
And it's just she carries the film, and not only does she carry the film, but the entire production does some. After years of origin stories and very typical motivations that they have on why they're fighting for a cause. It's just it's always the world ending, or what's their values that they have. You had a character that went back to really the basics of why we enjoy comics is the fight of good versus evil, the fight for humanity, the good in humanity, and the uplifting tone that even in a World War I film, there's a lot of uplifting tone and and talks about the greatness of humanity. Go for it.
No, there was, and also they did a enjoyable way of exploring this. I've grown up in a society that is very feminist, but by nature, because we are all female. And I'm going to come back into the world of men, where I've been taught on a whole that men are very, they're very horrible in the sense of warmongering. And I'm willing to explore that. And I'm still strong and willing to recognize that not all men are evil. I can still be a strong, independent woman who can defeat the odds. And also, I like this guy, at the same time. All those things happen. I would also say from a plot side, I personally was blindsided by the revelation of the villain. I personally was. I thought they did a good job with that myself.
It was neat to, again, slight spoiler, so skip ahead about a minute, that the God of War wasn't a muscular brute. It was more the mental manipulation of the man, which that was a really great...
Which, to be fair, he can turn into a werewolf whenever he wants, going to his other things that we've seen him in. So there's that piece.
And the first two acts the third act kind of goes back into a lot of similar tropes that we've seen in so many other films,
Mm-hmm.
but especially when they're right in the middle of World War One, when they're on the battlefield. That was some of the most fun I've had. Going back to what I said about Logan on the like the pain of war. This was one of those fight scenes that was the violence was a little bit more entertaining, but at the same time had a purpose,
Yes.
had a mission to it, showed the struggle.
Yep.
It was more animated than what we saw in Logan, and yet the impact that made on all the characters was still.
And my personal thing I liked about it, it broke formula, and I don't want to give anything away, but it broke formula, and the way that the film goes in the third act isn't the way you would suspect from typical formula in a couple of different directions, I will say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that on a whole. I will also say, jumping ahead, in the one that we most have recently watched this evening, there's some good hints that there could be a good comeback with her origin story alongside other mythos from the DC universe if they chose to explore that. And I would like to see that explored.
Yeah.
I would love to see that backstory explored a little bit more.
It'll be interesting to see. You want me to stop? No. It'll be interesting to see which direction that they go. We're recording this at the end of November. The last speculation that I've heard is that the next Wonder Woman film is going to be taking place in the 80s. What that means, or what characters we're going to be introduced to, we will see, and what conflicts there will be with the 80s will be interesting to see, whether it's Cold War, whether it's Iran-Contra. I'm not sure exactly what direction they're going with it, but it'll be interesting to see where they go with Wonder Woman.
Oliver North?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
How they want to bring to it. When it comes to my kids we own the movie. We haven't, as a family, watched it yet. It was, again, because of the World War One material. There was one that I definitely wanted to screen ahead of time.
Yeah.
Because World War One is one of the ugliest of not that any war is pretty,
No.
but it
Yep.
it's one of the more complex wars of the time.
Yeah.
And it's not like with World War II where you can have a definitive good guy, bad guy situation. A lot more difficult when it came to World War One. I mean, it's still, there were sides that people were aligned with, but much more complex and much more brutal, especially when it came to mustard gas and stuff, which is touched on in the film.
Yep.
I'm glad I screened it. My kids will see it, and it'll be something that we'll just have to prepare for the violence.
Pacing.
Yeah.
I will say yes, absolutely. I would say that it is definitely violence and vulgarity and overtones, sexuality. Nothing to be concerned about on a whole, I would say,
Yeah.
for kids. However, just general interest, I'm not sure the interest level would be there that it is for other ones.
We both have daughters. Your
Yep.
daughter's older than mine.
Yep.
My daughter will eat this up. One of the big things that has always been an issue for her, and not just because we're trying to push any that we want to push any agendas or anything, but she's always. My daughter's always been a little bit disappointed that there's so limited representation of women in action films. I remember when we watched Star Wars for the first time, asked what her favorite character was, and it was Leia. And
Yeah.
like, well, why is it Leia? It's like, well, she's the only girl in the movie, which is why I love the new trilogy of films when you have Rey, and she's not a good character just because she's a girl. She's a very intriguing character. So
Exactly. So the next one up was Homecoming. Fantastic film, and we're on the other side again. We're over back from DC over to Marvel. Next chapter in the MCU.
Yep, and the Sony allowed Marvel to play with their toys this time around, and worked out great.
Yes.
To think that this is the 6th Spider-Man film that we've had since 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
And for a character that is interesting but not super complex, yes, he's had strife in his life, but he doesn't hold the weight or the emotional baggage of like a Batman,
Correct.
where we've seen numerous adaptations, and it seems more rich that way. He is a kid, and
Yeah.
actually, with him being a kid, he's been portrayed in high school and college
Yeah.
in years past. But it was always, I mean, Tobey Maguire was great.
Yeah.
That being said, you could always tell that he was in his 20s when he was
Yes.
supposed to be in high school.
Yes.
Andrew Garfield was good.
Yeah.
I mean, fine. And then, oh my goodness, why can't I remember the young man's name?
Yep.
Okay, you talk while I look up his name on my
No,
computer.
seriously. Yeah, he is good, and I like the fact that what he's brought to the role that the other two I don't think have is wide-eyed innocence of I want to contribute to something that's already existing.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland
Yes.
is exactly what we were both thinking the whole time.
Exactly.
Yep. And he's brought this thing. The other two universes that have been set up with the other two in the last 17 years have been I'm isolated in my own. This is my reality. There aren't other ones. I'm it. This one brings the factor of okay. There's already these other people. I'm the new guy on the block, and I want to contribute to that. And I really like that reality of the fact that he recognizes not just that he's young, but that he also is, Tom come lately, kind of a feel to it.
Yeah, his dynamic not only with the other superheroes but also the other kids that he interacts. Which, if you've read the comic books, we've all seen these characters for years in different forms, and I'm not just talking physically and by race, but really.
Flash.
Flash, thank you.
Yep.
It was much more of your stereotypical bully in the comic books.
Yeah.
And here he was still very much the bully, but a different sense.
But he was still an egghead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was maybe it's just because we're nerds, but to see all these kids in a nerd high school,
Yes, exactly.
and,
Yeah.
deal with some of the same issues, but also I was living vicariously through these kids watching the entire time. Like that would have been awesome to go to a school like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
But just the youthful interaction
Mhm.
that seems so organic.
Yep.
It was it's just so refreshing, and I know that's what my kids picked up on instantly. They could tell these were kids. These were kids they were so older than them, but by 5 or 6 years, not 10 to 15.
Yes.
And so the emotional connection that they had throughout the film was great.
Well, and like you pointed out, his interactions with the other kids. So his best friend in it, huge character in the film, and incredibly enjoyable. He was not a background character. He was a prime character, and we loved him.
Yep.
He was so enjoyable, and we felt he contributed as much as the guy who had superpowers.
Yeah.
And they did a good job of making us really love him.
And what I liked about Ned's character is that he wasn't just the dopey friend, especially since he was a little bit overweight. It wasn't like the dopey fat kid. He had purpose. He was still a fun character. He was silly, but he wasn't a stereotype.
Correct. Yep,
So.
you're right. And he was fun. And we were like, you know what? We could be Ned. He wants to be the guy in the chair.
Yep.
He wants to be part of it, but he's still a regular guy. I could be that guy.
Yep.
He was very relatable that way. That was good. And from there, we jumped to...
Before we jump
yes.
too much, also one of the few good Marvel villains in the Vulture. Michael Keaton does a great job as the Vulture,
Yes.
and the big reveal at the beginning of the third act is fantastic.
Yes, it
is. The scene when Spider-Man's by himself in the collapsed warehouse is one that's a beautiful scene. The entire idea of if you're nobody without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. That entire message. It's the first Spider-Man movie we've had that with great power comes great responsibility.
It was also a callback for Tony because we've seen before when he felt he was too dependent on the suit.
Yep.
And he felt he had to and yet he came back to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it was very, very reminiscent of being a parent,
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, hey, you know what? I got to cut you off from this. Turns out I'm still a generation ahead of you. I'm still actually dependent on it too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very subtle reflection of real parenthood.
Yeah, and it just one of the probably one of the most family friendly of the comic book movies. I mean, besides Lego Batman, but really just a great film. It was the film that made my son decide not to be Star-Lord anymore for Halloween, but he wanted to be Spider. He never was a huge Spider-Man fan, and then he saw Homecoming and he absolutely loved it. So yeah, that's great. And the violence isn't too much. I mean, there's no when it comes to the check boxes that you want to make sure that films are okay when it comes to violence or sex or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's safe, it's fine. It's PG-13, but it's a really soft PG-13. It's nothing more than what you'd see on a Saturday morning cartoon.
Correct.
If Saturday morning cartoons still existed, it's just
which
cable
is
network style.
which is really, really good, because even as adults, we enjoyed something that soft.
Yep.
You know, we did. We enjoyed it. We were like, this is good. This is great. I'll sit down. I'll watch it again.
Yep.
You know, with my kid. And next up, we had Thor Ragnarok. Came out 2 weeks ago. I am going to say fantastic family film on a whole. Not necessarily all age ranges.
Yeah.
My youngest son my whole family went to it. Everybody was engaged except for my youngest son, the 7-year-old. He got very squirrely, couldn't hold his attention the whole time. Outside of that, 9-year-old and up did pretty good.
This film was the He-Man movie that I always wanted as a kid. It was big broody guy that's punching monsters in the face in fantasy worlds with swords and gladiator type armor and just goofy, just all the way around. Just doesn't take itself seriously for 1 second.
Which is what I've heard you say would do well for other films that are coming out in the near future.
Yeah, I think embracing there's been this rumor for a while that one of the studios owns the rights to Masters of the Universe and He-Man, and some of the production stills that have come out they're working on the film, but it looks like it's going to be one of those really serious, brooding, and we're gonna be reflective on our emotions and stuff. And not that that's bad, but not every movie, especially when you have content that allows you to just be silly.
Well, and depending on who your audience is that you're calling in on. Now, those of us who grew up with He-Man, for example, we're not necessarily looking for depth. You know, we're looking for fun. This film, Thor Ragnarok, was fun, and it was fun, good humor. There was good humor for the kids. There was also good humor for the adults on a depth that the kids wouldn't quite understand. You know, they did bring in the Hulk with with what we would consider to be possibly EBD, you know, going on, and it was just fun to recognize that and have him trying to recognize that, and it was like, yeah, that's good, that's real life. There really are kids like that. That's fun, you know, and then having the relationship with him and Thor, and then just having fun, bang them up, you know, go, here's the clear-cut villain, how are we going to defeat them? And then having what isn't necessarily the cookie-cutter ending.
Yeah. I think people or comic book fans are expecting Planet Hulk in this movie are going to be disappointed.
Right.
But if you're, it's I think it's one of the silliest. It's one of the most fun, and yet it's also one of the most disposable of the of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You can lift it out.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be in the great context of things.
Yeah.
There are some fun moments. There's not. It's not like with Civil War in which you want to just watch the airport scene by itself, or Iron Man versus Captain America. There isn't that scene. There's the Hulk versus Thor scene, which is fun, but they
but
showed
it's
for
fun. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not because you actually are engaged to the level of, oh, who's gonna win. This is more like, oh, who's gonna win.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, so it was silly fun. Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Chris Hemsworth as Thor. They play off each other very well.
Yes.
It was neat. In other films, Chris Hemsworth has shown that he is a great comedic actor, and this film showed what never showed. They didn't even try with the first two Thor films. Here they went full out with him being this silly goof that was also.
And I choose to think that he loved it.
Yeah,
you know, that he had a good time doing that too. You know,
it was quite evident. The one big thing, and we've already kind of touched on it a few times. The main antagonist. You have somebody with Kate Blanchett who's so talented and so good. And yet, her whenever she was on screen, those are, I wonder if were those the times that your son really checked out, was when she was doing monologues.
You know, to be honest, he was more checked out in general with the overall length, and his attention isn't held well with live action in general. And he's actually told me as much, which is a good thing for a dad to be aware of. He's told me, you know, Dad, I don't like real people. I like cartoons. You know, so he's told me as much.
That's good to know. To have that expectation going in.
Yeah.
That's good. But getting back to Hela, that was her name, right?
Yep.
That's how much of an impact she made on me. She's the goddess of death, and yet I couldn't care less.
She was, and to break, they totally broke from the mythology on that. She's actually traditionally Loki's daughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yep.
Yeah, it was. The change was. It happened.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's like with a lot of film. There's some really fun parts.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I'll probably end up buying the DVD just because. But it's not going to be the one that's going to be in the constant rotation. Maybe my kids haven't seen it yet. They might surprise me and want to watch it more. But they're much more wanting to watch Spider-Man or Guardians. And it was fun. There's not too much. I did like the visuals were great. It's a setting just like with Guardians. It's not your typical browns and blacks and brooding and just angst filled lack of color.
Yeah,
it was vibrant from beginning to end of just everything jumping off the screen. It was pretty to look at. It was a pixie stick of a film, which was just a big sugar high. Little substance to it, but it was still.
And actually, interesting. You should use the phrase "pixie stick" because the aesthetics in this also totally lend themselves to a full family audience. Bright colors, very well done too. I don't think it wasn't just Saturday morning cartoon use of them. It really was bright colors all the way through. And that's going to grab everybody's attention. I felt. Yeah. It like you pointed out, it's not necessarily depth of story. This one is very much a just for fun. You know, just watch
the
it for
epitome
fun.
of a popcorn film.
Yeah,
you're going to it just you're gonna have a good time, but it's not deep theater. It's not serious drama. Yeah.
And personally, a lot of times those are the ones I personally love. You know, I have a good time with those.
Good escapism.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And it is a Nerd Dad's thing. Ones you can engage with your kids. You can laugh. They can love it. You know, you're all good.
You can watch it, but then you'll move on. It's one of the films that you won't be having the conversations with afterwards. It's not like with Guardians, in which we were talking about, or my son was crying at the end of the movie. Why are we crying? Well, he died. Why is that sad? And we were able to have those conversations. You don't have that with this one at all.
Exactly. You're completely right. And again, it's a lift out. If you're looking at the MCU for continuity, this one is a lift out, which in my mind makes it a little more fun. You can have it as a standalone just for fun.
Yep.
And 2 weeks later, which brings us to tonight, Justice League. And we just finished viewing that a few hours ago.
Yep. And depending on the order of which we release our content for the website, our review of our in-depth review with our friend Eric also joining in with the review will probably be up before this goes up. But it was, I would say, of the films that we've discussed this evening, it was my least favorite of all of them. It was still good.
Yeah.
It's with a lowercase g to good. There was...
at least on the days that we are as, humble as Drax.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But both of us grew up big DC fans. Batman's my favorite character of all comic book films. So our expectations have always been pretty high of these films, or whenever these characters are represented on screen. We had disappointment with Batman v Superman. I loathed Man of Steel. Wonder Woman we just discussed we really enjoyed. But Wonder Woman was a film set away from everything else in the continuity.
It could be a lift out again.
Yeah. And it was great by itself.
Yeah.
This film, you can tell that there's been production drama and issues going on ever since it was announced. Whether it was the director needing to step away because of family tragedy, whether it was the reaction to the critical drubbing that Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad got, and not only the critical drubbing, but the box office drop that the films it had like a strong opening Friday, and by Sunday they were seeing dramatic drops because word was getting out.
Yes.
Yeah, so you could tell it was a film that had a lot of people panicked and concerned about the direction of it. That being said, there are still some good elements to the film because these are good characters that we as comic book fans have grown to love throughout the years.
Well, yes, and having said that, too, if you are a fan of the series that you see going on right now in the Arrow universe, for example, Flash, very popular show and well done character. The one in this one did good. You could still look at this guy as a separate character from that one and enjoy it. And they did do a good job of that. They were very aware that they were competing with an established medium already, and they did a good job with that. I would say, if you were to lift out the MCU altogether, the Marvel Cinematic Universe altogether, have this be the first comer of the last 10 years, with some of the things it tried to do, would have been done very well.
It does remind me a lot of the superhero films we got post Batman Returns. The mid the mid 90s all the way up to like Batman and Robin. That period where it was famous people in costumes. And it relied a lot on the fact that we have enjoyed the visual or knowing these characters, and we were watching the costumes on screen. But unlike what we've talked about with a lot of the other films of the year, the lack of depth of anything interesting when it came to the characters, even parts of the characters that were enjoyable in previous films, like what we've been talking about with Wonder Woman, who we really enjoy in this film, kind of there, not a ton to her. We have conflicting feelings on Ben Affleck in Batman v Superman,
which is healthy.
Yes. Yes. We don't have to agree on everything, but with this performance, whether it's he's checked out or they just didn't give him anything to work with, this is probably the dullest version of Bruce Wayne that has been on the big screen. And that's, as a Batman fan, that kind of stinks. Wherever Batman's on screen, you're kind of like, I'd rather watch.
Well, and I think that's kind of that is an issue in general, because that was also a problem with Alfred in this, and we've already discussed that that's a problem with Wonder Woman. So when you bring a montage in, the important thing is to have the montage, the group, be strong without diminishing the individual characters.
Mm-hmm.
And we've now discussed 3 characters that were diminished
Yep.
in this one. At the sake of making the montage, did it add to it? No.
Mm-hmm.
So, you need to look at being able to make a team mentality and still maintain what you've already established with the individual characters as well.
Yeah. Another big weakness with the film is, again, with the villains, with the antagonists. It's especially in DC, there are so many good villains in here.
Yes.
This, with the Steppenwolf, it's just another powerful guy who wants to rule the world or just destroy the world.
Yeah.
And has no motivations beyond that. And knowing that this is a film that has other films in mind, I'm checked out.
You know, and that's important to hear you say, because one thing you've noted in conversation before, when you look at Marvel and DC in comparison, is that DC does have a very strong villain base, a good rogues gallery outside of just Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, a good rogues gallery. So if you can't maximize on that, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I think they did, of the few things that I enjoyed about Man of Steel, and there are very few things, General Zod is something that
Mm-hmm.
The performance is a little over the top, but at the same time, the motivations of the character are established and not 100% villainy. It
Mm-hmm.
was, there was reasons for his actions in that film that he could justify, which always makes for a much more interesting villain if you can justify the reasons why you're doing what you're doing.
If you can give us a little bit of a reason to relate and maybe care for what they're doing.
Yep.
Yes.
And Steppenwolf, there's none of that.
Correct.
He's just big guy with a shiny axe.
Yep.
It just so lame. And also for a $300 million film, I can't do any computer design or computer graphics to save my life. That being said, for $300 million, you'd want to see something a little bit more visually pleasing than this.
Well, and I will also say on top of that, for coming out 2 weeks after the competition, there was some marked similarities that you want to make sure you step away from. And I don't want to do spoilers, but just design-wise, costume-wise with the villain, there is some definite differences you want to step away from.
Yep.
And if you watch the two of them back to back, you'll guess what I'm talking about.
Now, as much as we've been trashing this film, there are some really good redeemable parts of it. I'm still glad that I saw it.
Yeah.
The third act in particular gives me hope on if we are going to see more film. I went into this film with incredibly low expectations because of my feelings of the previous films. And for the most part, or like first beginning half of this film, I was like, okay, we're just going to get through this and it's going to be done. By the third act, there were elements that were thrown in, especially with, okay, I'm going to say spoiler in 3, 2, 1, but if you've seen Batman v Superman, you kind of expect this is going to happen, and if you watch anything with the news, you know it's going to happen, but Superman comes back. And when he does finally return, even though the way he comes back is convoluted and a mess, when he's back, this is the first time I enjoyed seeing Superman on screen, this version of him. It finally brings back the hope portion of Superman that has been missing this entire time, which was completely missed. The opportunity missed in Batman v Superman, in which all the inner turmoils of should I be good or should I not is thrown out, and we can just enjoy Superman for being the guy who wants to do good, just like how Wonder Woman tried just to be, just wants to bring peace and save those in need.
Yep.
We got to see this version of Superman that didn't have to be in angst the entire time.
Yeah.
And it was so refreshing. So even though the conflict itself is insanely predictable, it's the third act finale is just, that's when it finally became fun.
Yeah.
And if that's if it is the direction we're going, if we're going to have more of these, let's have it in this vein.
Well, and I will also say, so third act, and then for me, a couple of the most exciting parts that I saw were in the third act and beyond. I was excited to see, they made a couple of very fun comic book references for those who know their lore. The opening scene on a whole was a reference directly, in my guess, was a reference directly to the Arkham City, Arkham Knight, that series of video games, which is great. And then there was a couple references actually to an arc that's supposed to come out this month in the comic book realm. Very subtle, but I thought it was well done. And then actually the stinger. There is a stinger for those of you who haven't seen it yet.
Which is the first time for a DC movie.
Yeah. So that was fun. We did stay around and we were able to witness that. The stinger actually leads to an idea I personally would love to see happen. Now, you made a comment earlier tonight about that idea, about maybe giving it a couple of years rest.
Yeah. This is all inside baseball type things when it comes to the films, but a lot of what happens moving forward is going to be what is the box office number is going to be. This film is, by layman's standards, going to make an insane amount of money this weekend. But the amount of money that needed to be made because the cost of production was astronomical. I think I already mentioned the film production was $300 million. After marketing, distribution rights, and everything else, this film has to make a minimum of $600 million worldwide. For a superhero film, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Both Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad, crushed that out of the water. But right now, the numbers aren't looking like it's going to be that way.
Right.
So because of that, if there have been films in the past where there have been teasers, and then because the film didn't do well, we never saw what came after that teaser. Ghostbusters 2016 is a prime example. They totally built up for the sequel. We're never getting that sequel. The Dark Universe with the Mummy, we are not seeing anymore. Even though that entire film was set up for future films. Depending on the teaser, there is another film that is already in pre-production of one of the characters in that teaser, and whether his film becomes what you hope it will be. Are we being vague enough with our description of this? But
point being with that vagueness, there's a possible coming up one where one of the characters in the stinger could be a central character. There is also the possibility of a much broader tie-in, and that's the thing where I still tying into what is maybe a very schoolboy type of thing. I'd love to see it happen. So the point being with that is this film on a whole, not necessarily fantastic. Again, if you could lift out the last 10 years of MCU, this film could have been very good. Unfortunately, it is competing with what has already been established, and it didn't necessarily knock it out of the park with those standards. But it did leave a couple of open doors where if it wanted to, it could still go a different direction and do very well.
One of the biggest tragedies about the DC cinematic universe is that the Warner Brothers was always hesitant on pulling the trigger of making these films because they didn't think that bringing all these properties together would generate enough box office gold that they needed to do such a project. And the Avengers proved that yes, you could. But then again, this film is so you can tell the entire time you're watching this film, they're trying to be the people next door. They want to be the Joneses. They're trying to compete with the Joneses the entire time. And it's what hampers the film most.
I agree.
So you don't get this film without the Avengers, but you get this film because of the Avengers.
Yes.
So, and bringing it to how your kids will relate to this film, I think this is a pass. Or I there's no objections to them seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on your kid's interest in the your kid's interest in the characters will be the driving factor on whether they will enjoy the movie or
Yeah.
not. If they like Batman because they like Batman, they're gonna like it. Or
Yeah.
same with Wonder Woman.
Yep.
The Flash is silly enough. Superman comes back, and
Yeah.
it's always he's Superman. That's fun. So your kids might approach this film the same way that they do with Thor Ragnarok. You know, where it just looks like a bunch of action figures being slammed together.
But I will say this on top of that as well, though. If you have the choice, if you're looking at what to do in the next couple months here in November, going into December, choose the one between the other with your kids. Go with Thor.
Yeah, or I would just say stay at home and go back and watch it. If you haven't seen some of the earlier films, I think I really Spider-Man: Homecoming, Guardians, and Batman or Lego Batman are going to be. You've got three great ones right there. I think stay at home and enjoy those.
You have a snowed in afternoon right there.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I do. Well, thank you very much for joining us. This has been our 2017 year in review. Our first one, actually, of Dad Chat.
Yep. And this has been kind of an experiment like the entire process has been so far. We would love to hear your feedback.
Yes.
If there's any topics that you'd like us to talk about in future episodes, we will likely be talking about specific issues when it comes to nerd culture and parenting.
Yes.
This was probably more episodes in the future won't be more review based like this one will be. It will be more of what we have on our website in talking about the relationship that you can build with your kids and enjoying the hobby that is nerd and pop culture.
You got it.
So if there are any topics that you're interested in, please feel free to send us comments. Depending on if this is up on YouTube, please leave it on the YouTube comments below or visit our website. We have a comment section there as well. But thank you very much for listening in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.